Welcome back to Eurocope. What happens when a NATO member makes a move so bold that even Washington and Brussels are left scrambling? Turkey has just shattered expectations, acting alone without NATO's approval or the EU's consent. But why? What's driving Erdogan to take such a massive risk, challenging Russia, defying allies, and reshaping the global order? Behind closed doors, secret talks have set the stage for a geopolitical shift. Is this a master stroke or a reckless gamble? One thing is certain. This move could shake NATO to its core and leave Russia with no escape. Stay tuned, because this changes everything. Number 1, the secret meetings behind Turkey's decision. You've just witnessed one of the most shocking geopolitical moves in modern history. Turkey, a NATO member, has made an unprecedented decision regarding Ukraine. But make no mistake, this wasn't some last-minute impulse. This was a move carefully orchestrated behind closed doors in Ankara, the culmination of high-stakes diplomacy and secret negotiations. Imagine the scene deep in the heart of Turkey's capital, away from the eyes of the media. World leaders gathered for private talks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. No cameras, no press, just whispered agreements that would soon send shockwaves across the globe. According to inside sources, Turkey positioned itself as a mediator, but behind the scenes its military was already preparing for something much bigger. Then, just days after these back-channel meetings, Erdogan dropped the bombshell. Turkey would send peacekeeping troops into Ukraine. Not just advisors, not just humanitarian aid. Actual military forces wearing the Turkish flag. And here's what makes this move even more stunning. This is not a NATO mission. This was not sanctioned by Brussels or Washington. Turkey is acting alone. Can you imagine the chaos this caused in diplomatic circles? NATO and the EU were blindsided, left scrambling to understand what Ankara was up to. The message from Turkey was loud and clear. It's done. Waiting on the West? But why now? Why did Turkey choose this exact moment to act? In global politics, timing is everything. Just weeks before Erdogan's declaration, a secret meeting took place in Istanbul between US and Russian delegates. What was on the table? Washington was pushing for an emergency ceasefire. Turkey was kept in the loop, but refused to wait for Western bureaucracy to dictate Ukraine's fate. And then, in February 2025, Turkey made its position clear. Turkey stands ready to guarantee peace in Ukraine with its own forces if necessary. This statement marked a turning point in the war. While NATO had provided weapons, intelligence, and training, no member state had openly deployed combat troops until now. Here's the big question. What's Turkey really after? This isn't just about Ukraine, it's about redefining Turkey's role on the world stage. Experts say Ankara has a threefold strategy: expand Turkey's influence, pushing beyond NATO's constraints, control the Black Sea, securing energy interests, cementing Turkey as a key player in Europe's geopolitical landscape. By taking unilateral action, Turkey is directly challenging NATO's decision-making structure and testing the limits of its relationship with Russia. With Turkish troops now in Ukraine, Moscow faces an impossible choice. If Russia escalates, it risks direct conflict with a NATO military power. If Russia ignores Turkey's presence, it signals weakness to the world. The Kremlin is trapped. And here's why this move is so devastating for Moscow. Russia has suffered over 450,000 casualties since the war began. Economic sanctions have reduced Russia's gross domestic product by nearly 7% in the past 12 months. Ukraine's counter-offensives, backed by Western support, are regaining key territories. For Russia, losing Ukraine was never an option, but now, with Turkish forces on the ground, everything has changed. Now all eyes are on NATO, the EU and Russia. Will NATO punish Turkey for going rogue? Will Russia retaliate militarily? Or are we witnessing the birth of a new power dynamic in Eastern Europe? One thing is certain, Turkey is no longer playing by NATO's rules. This is a game changer, and the consequences could reshape global politics for years to come. Another, the balance of power is shifting, and fast. This move changes everything. The world is now watching how Russia, NATO, and the US will respond. Will Russia retaliate, knowing it now faces a NATO military presence in Ukraine? Will NATO support Turkey, or will it try to rein in this bold move? And most importantly, is this the beginning of a whole new war front in Eastern Europe? One thing is clear, Turkey is no longer playing by NATO's rules, and as this crisis unfolds, the stakes couldn't be higher. Is Turkey stepping in to restore peace, or is this a risky strategic gamble? Will NATO stand by Turkey, or is this the beginning of a major alliance rift? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget, if you want real-time updates on this breaking story, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single development. This is only the beginning. Stay tuned. If you believe Turkey is stepping in as a peacemaker, comment one. If you think this is a strategic power play, comment two. Your voice matters. Let's get the discussion started. And don't forget, this is only the beginning. The situation is evolving fast, and we're bringing you real-time updates as it unfolds. Subscribe to Doi Globe now, turn on notifications, and stay ahead of the story. Number 3, the global reaction, confusion, shock, and panic. When Turkey announced its independent military move into Ukraine, the world was caught off guard. The shockwaves were felt from NATO headquarters in Brussels to the Kremlin in Moscow, triggering an unprecedented diplomatic crisis. But beyond the political elite, millions around the world are now questioning, what does Turkey's move mean for the future of NATO? Is Russia willing to escalate further? Could Turkey's bold decision backfire economically and militarily? To truly understand the scale of this event, let's break down the reactions from the Western nations, Russia and Turkey itself. Inside NATO's headquarters in Brussels, diplomats struggle to formulate a response. Turkey is a long-standing NATO member, yet it acted alone, a move that exposed deep fractures within the alliance. France and the United Kingdom felt outmaneuvered as they were developing their own peacekeeping strategies for Ukraine. Now Turkey had taken the lead, reshaping the power dynamic. A leaked memo from British Prime Minister Keir Starmer warned that Turkey's solo military action could fragment Western unity in the Ukraine conflict. In private, European officials debated, has Turkey positioned itself as the key military player in Eastern Europe? Could this signal the beginning of a new order within NATO, one where certain countries act independently of Washington and Brussels? What do you think? Could Turkey's actions inspire other NATO members to take independent action in future conflicts? As expected, Russia's reaction was swift and severe. Within hours of Turkey's announcement, Moscow state media launched a propaganda offensive condemning Ankara's decision. Russian state media labeled Turkey's move as a hostile intervention. On March of the year 2025, Russia's TASS news agency released a chilling statement. Turkey must decide if it is our partner or our enemy. Hardliners in Moscow pushed for a direct response, urging President Vladimir Putin to expand military strikes closer to NATO borders. Some Russian analysts have warned that Turkey's military presence in Ukraine could justify a Russian retaliation beyond Ukraine's current war zones. But here's where things get even more unpredictable. Russia and Turkey still share critical economic and strategic ties. Within Turkey, reactions have been deeply divided. While some celebrate Turkey's emergence as a regional power, others fear the long-term consequences of this military move. Nationalists in Ankara celebrated the decision. To them, this marks Turkey's rise as an independent military force, proving that Ankara doesn't need Washington or Brussels to shape foreign policy. Is Turkey creating a new path, one that challenges the traditional Western nations versus Eastern nations' power structure? Retired General Min Gurak has openly warned that entering Ukraine without North Atlantic Treaty Organization backing could prove disastrous. Turkish troops would face direct engagement with Russian-backed forces, potentially dragging Turkey into a prolonged conflict with no North Atlantic Treaty Organization guarantees of support. Turkey relies on Russia for more than 40% of its natural gas. If Moscow retaliates with an energy embargo, Turkey could face soaring inflation, fuel shortages, and economic instability, all at a time when the Turkish economy is already under pressure. A new power play is in motion, as Turkey makes its boldest move in modern history. We can't ignore the powerful figures shaping this geopolitical shift. 3 of the most influential and unpredictable leaders, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Vladimir Putin, and Donald Trump, have built a history of unconventional diplomacy that could define what happens next. So, is this just another political maneuver, or are we witnessing a global power shift unfold in real time? When it comes to global politics, personal relationships matter. Erdogan and Trump have always had an unusual dynamic. In the year 2019, former United States President Donald Trump publicly called Erdogan a tough guy and a friend. Unlike previous United States presidents who relied on formal diplomatic channels, Trump handled international relations differently, favoring personal conversations over official negotiations. According to a 2025 analysis by the Atlantic Council, Trump and Erdogan bypassed traditional diplomacy and relied on direct phone calls to negotiate deals, de-escalate conflicts, and broker agreements. Fast forward to early 2025, and that back-channel diplomacy remains in play. When Trump's team needed a ceasefire brokered, they didn't call Brussels or the United Nations, they called Ankara. This raises a key question. Could Trump's return to power revive this unconventional partnership, influencing Turkey's next move? What do you think? Does this personal connection mean Turkey could act as a wildcard in United States foreign policy? If Erdogan and Trump share an unpredictable bond, then Erdogan and Putin's relationship is even more complex. These two leaders have met more times than any other leader in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the Russian president, a fact that reveals the depth of their diplomatic ties. During the January 2025 Astana summit, Putin reportedly joked, "Erdogan is the only leader in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization who negotiates like a mafia boss." While it may have been a joke, there is a deeper truth behind it. Erdogan has a reputation for playing both sides, balancing Turkey's role within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization while simultaneously cutting strategic deals with Russia. If Russia begins to see Turkey as merely a tool of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, then Moscow could retaliate economically or militarily. This could mean harsher economic sanctions on Turkey, which relies on Russia for energy imports, and increased military pressure in regions where Turkey has key interests, such as Syria and the Black Sea. So, the real question is, how long can Erdogan maintain this balancing act, and if forced to choose, will he stand with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or align with Moscow? With Turkey's military now stepping into Ukraine, this isn't just about battlefield tactics, it's about a shifting global order. The alliances and rivalries between Erdogan, Putin and Trump could shape the next decade of geopolitics. If Donald Trump returns to the White House, will United States foreign policy shift back toward Turkey? If Vladimir Putin feels betrayed, will Russia escalate economic and military pressure on Ankara? And most importantly, how will Turkey's independent actions reshape its standing in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? One thing is certain, we are witnessing history unfold in real time. Turkey's unprecedented military intervention in Ukraine is not just a bold decision. It is a gamble with enormous consequences. Right now, the world is watching closely to see if Turkey's independent strategy will position it as a global kingmaker, or if this will be a miscalculation with devastating consequences. The risks are high, the rewards even higher. Let's explore three possible scenarios: the best outcome, the worst-case scenario, and the ultimate gamble Turkey faces in this high-stakes geopolitical game. Best-case scenario, Turkey becomes the kingmaker. If Turkey's actions force Russia and Ukraine to resume peace negotiations, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan could orchestrate a diplomatic success that transforms Turkey's influence on the global stage. Imagine this. Ankara secures a peace agreement on its own terms, proving that it is not just a regional power but a legitimate global mediator. Think of Switzerland's historical role, a nation that established itself as a neutral diplomatic powerhouse in international conflicts. If Turkey achieves this, it could elevate itself to a power broker status not only in Eastern Europe but also in the Black Sea region and the Middle East. Stronger regional influence, if successful, Turkey would have expanded its leadership role beyond Ukraine, reshaping its position in major geopolitical discussions. But let's face it, this decision could also backfire in a way that Turkey did not anticipate. Military escalation. If Moscow perceives Turkey's involvement as an act of aggression, Russia may respond with military strikes on Turkish forces. The situation could spiral out of control, potentially dragging Turkey into a prolonged conflict with no guarantees of assistance from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Turkey has left the sidelines. The war in Ukraine is no longer just a regional battle. It has evolved into a global contest for power. The traditional world order is shifting, and Turkey is no longer a bystander. For decades, the global power balance was dominated by three major players: the United States of America, the Russian Federation, and the People's Republic of China. But now a new power has stepped forward. Nations will no longer look only to the United States, Russia or China. They will now look to Turkey. This is not mere speculation. Turkey's military actions in Ukraine have sent shockwaves through global political circles, forcing world leaders to reconsider Turkey's evolving role in geopolitics. For many years, Turkey maintained a delicate balance, holding membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization while maintaining strong diplomatic and economic ties with Russia. It supplied military equipment to Ukraine, yet continued to collaborate with Moscow on energy and trade. This strategy allowed Turkey to navigate both sides of the geopolitical spectrum, benefiting from its unique position between East and West. By deploying military forces into Ukraine, Turkey has drawn a definitive line. This is no longer just about military presence, it is about redefining global influence. Turkey has demonstrated that it is willing to act independently of Washington, Brussels, and Moscow. For decades, the rules of diplomacy followed a set pattern. Smaller nations aligned themselves with one of the world's superpowers. But today, Turkey's move proves that the old rules of global power no longer apply. Turkey's military intervention raises an important question. Are we entering a new era where middle-sized powers dictate global affairs? For the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Turkey's independent military action challenges the unity of the alliance. Will this create a new power struggle within NATO? For Russia, Turkey was previously seen as a balancing force. Does this signal the start of a deeper confrontation between Moscow and Ankara? For the rest of the world, will other nations follow Turkey's example and begin asserting more independent foreign policies? This shift could redefine global diplomacy, much like how Switzerland historically positioned itself as a neutral mediator in world conflicts. When history unfolds before our eyes, the most compelling way to experience it is through the perspective of those on the ground. From the bustling streets of Istanbul to the war-torn landscapes of Ukraine, a travel documentary approach allows us to witness the human impact of these monumental decisions, not just from politicians, but from everyday people caught in the middle of history. How are Turkish citizens reacting to this unexpected military shift? What does this mean for Ukrainian civilians who now see Turkey as a military ally? How is Russian media portraying Turkey's intervention in Ukraine? Documenting these moments through immersive storytelling is essential for understanding major geopolitical changes. As Turkey makes its bold move and NATO watches closely, the situation in Ukraine takes an even more complex turn. With Russia facing mounting challenges and limited options, global tensions continue to rise. What do you think will happen next? Will Turkey's actions reshape the geopolitical landscape, or will this lead to further escalation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to DOI Globe for more in-depth updates on global events, and make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss our latest reports. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you in the next video.